I am a retired park ranger, and during my career, I worked at one of the most famous national parks in the United States. This park is known for many unexplained events and sightings experienced by both staff and visitors. Specifically, I was assigned to an area notorious for numerous reports of Bigfoot activity. Among the rangers, it was a well-known fact that this creature had been seen on several occasions. The most recent sighting was reported by a family who described seeing a large, hairy man walking through their campsite late at night. The father recounted how he shined his flashlight at the figure. All he could see were eyes reflecting the light back at him. Despite his yelling for the figure to leave, it continued to walk slowly into the woods. My job required me to investigate any incidents or unusual occurrences within my patrol area. Following this incident, I interviewed other campers to determine if anyone else might have seen something strange during their stay. A couple camping with their 2 children mentioned hearing loud crashing sounds from the nearby woods around midnight. They also recalled hearing what sounded like loud grunting during the quieter moments of the night. Although our park is home to bears, these witnesses were adamant that the noises did not resemble any bear sounds they had previously encountered. In the days following, I conducted additional interviews with other campers, but no one else reported anything unusual. However, on Friday evening, just before dusk, another camper reported a large, hairy animal near her tent. This woman was extremely distressed. When I asked her husband, he suggested she might be exaggerating due to her tendency to scare easily. Yet another witness, a man who appeared to be a typical mountain man, came forward. He reported seeing something strange near his tent earlier that day. With 3 separate reports of an encounter with an unknown creature, I decided to inform my supervisor of the situation. Having worked at this park for several years, I had never encountered any mentions of Bigfoot in the area. My supervisor, however, shared that he had heard similar stories from other rangers. He also mentioned photos taken by a hiker the previous year, which seemed to show a large, hairy creature in the woods. He suggested setting up trail cameras around the campground to capture any images of the creature. We installed 4 motion-activated trail cameras within 2 days. After a week without further sightings or incidents, we reviewed the images from the trail cameras. One photo, taken late at night, showed a tall figure standing near a tree with glowing eyes. This astonishing discovery was sent to our headquarters and forwarded to wildlife experts for examination. They concluded that the figure could either be someone in a costume or possibly an actual Sasquatch. Our superintendent then instructed us to remove all references to Bigfoot activity from our records due to the potential for public panic. The directive was clear. If anyone asked about Bigfoot, we were to deny any evidence of its existence. I retired soon after this incident, and to my knowledge, no further action has been taken regarding these strange occurrences. If you want more information, feel free to contact me anytime. I'm not sure if this will interest you, but I found it quite strange. My friend and I were hiking in a national park near my house. We took an unfamiliar path, which led us up the mountainside where there were few trees. As we walked and chatted, I noticed a group of people on top of a rock formation. They were all in white robes, holding hands in a circle around an object. This seemed odd to me. I pointed them out to my friend, who immediately wondered about their purpose there, dressed in such a way. We kept our distance, as my friend dislikes being watched. As we got closer, it became clear that something was not right. From above, the group appeared too tall for their location, their heads barely reaching knee level with the rocks behind them. They seemed to be kneeling, sitting, or crouching in their huddle. It looked like a ritualistic ceremony, with a few individuals performing strange motions amidst the stillness of the others. A chill ran down my spine at the sight. It felt like an invasion of nature itself. These similarly dressed people were standing around this object, chanting or murmuring words I couldn't understand. The sight of the cloaked figures swaying together in such serene surroundings gave off an ominous vibe. After watching them for a while, a sudden wind blew, and when I looked back, the group had vanished without a trace. We decided to leave the area as soon as possible, which was challenging due to the steepness of the trail. Neither of us wanted to spend another minute in that unsettling place. So, sorry for the long-winded story, but I thought it might be worth sharing. Have you ever heard of anything like this? Do you know of any logical explanation for why anyone would do something so odd in a national park? I've included some pictures below of where we saw them. However, they don't capture the eerie feeling or show exactly what we experienced. I hope everything is going well on your end. Take care and have a great day. My sighting took place in the summer of 1967 at Glacier National Park, Montana. My wife and I were camping at St. Mary's Campground near St. Mary's Lake. It was a Sunday night, and we were en route to Spokane, Washington for an extended stay with my sister's family. As we sat around our campfire that evening, discussing the day's events and our future plans, we suddenly heard a high-pitched sound from the direction of the lake, about 200 yards away through some trees. The noise, which sounded electronic, or perhaps like machinery, lasted only a few seconds, but instantly grabbed our attention due to its unusual nature in such a remote setting. We listened intently and soon heard another burst of similar sound. It seemed to repeat intermittently, going silent for about 30 seconds or more before resuming. The sound seemed artificial, unlike any animal call typical of the area. After listening for a while, still puzzled about the source of this strange noise, my wife decided to investigate. Glacier National Park, home to grizzly bears, wolves, and cougars, is a place where wildlife encounters, though rare, are possible. Back in those days, people sometimes fed the animals at campsites. This practice was prohibited, but enforcement was lax, and many were unaware of the dangers. My wife moved cautiously closer, eventually getting near enough to not only hear, but also see what appeared to be two females in the distance, seemingly playing with each other. She believed they might have been aware of her presence, as they seemed to move further apart every time she got closer, eventually stopping altogether. These animals stood upright on their hind legs, almost motionless, appearing to wrestle or engage in a similar activity. Finally, my wife decided she had seen enough and returned to our campsite. We continued to sit by the fire, discussing what she had observed. Although I didn't witness anything myself, my 45 years of experience with wildlife in Alaska leads me to believe those cougars were aware of her presence. It's curious they didn't charge at her, as neither seemed afraid of people. In retrospect, this incident was a rather eerie experience that we've never forgotten. However, we left Glacier National Park the next morning without any further incidents. Have a great day, Josh. My brother and I were fishing for brook trout on the North Fork of the Buffalo River, located 2 miles above Boxley Bridge. This spot is about 10 miles west of Ponca, Arkansas, in Newton County. It was around 4 p.m. in early September, roughly 8 years ago. The day had been cloudy, but it hadn't rained until late that afternoon. As dusk approached, we decided to head back to our truck. However, a big storm hit with lightning, heavy rain, and strong winds. Our journey back took longer than expected due to fallen trees blocking the trail. By the time we reached a steep hillside just off the river, it was dark. This area, densely wooded, presented a challenging route. My brother, leading the way with his flashlight, noticed what looked like an open area a few hundred yards away. Initially, he thought there were campers because of a visible structure. When he moved the light upward over this structure, he suddenly exclaimed and urged me to run. I was confused as I hadn't seen anything yet. Then, as my eyes adjusted to the scene, I saw beings illuminated by white light beams. These beams enveloped them, revealing their shapes. The intensity of the light varied with each being's size and structure. Most were quite large, possibly 12 feet tall, and seemed hunched over with very long arms. They had big, oval-shaped heads covered in dark reddish-brown fur. Some had thin, blonde manes, primarily around their faces, giving them a somewhat human-like appearance. These beings exuded a sense of confidence and fearlessness, as if they were doing whatever they pleased, knowing nothing could stop them. We never determined how many there were or if there was any communication among them. We didn't stay to find out and never wanted to. I am a 52-year-old male who has been hiking, camping, and exploring the wilderness for over 30 years. Living in New York State, I often travel to different parts of the country for these activities. In my travels, I've encountered some strange, unexplainable things. One such incident occurred during a solo trip in a national park in the summer of 2014. Around noon, I took a break at a favorite spot along the trail. This area, surrounded by large hemlock trees and rhododendron bushes, was peaceful and familiar. As I settled on a log, about 50 feet from an old stone wall that snakes through the park, something unusual caught my eye. There was movement behind some brush near the end of the wall. It was deliberate, not the fleeting movement of an animal or bird. After several minutes of observation, two figures emerged from behind the brush, slowly moving towards me. They wore long white robes or gowns with hoods covering their heads and carried what looked like wooden walking sticks. As they approached, stopping briefly about 20 feet away, they completely ignored my presence. They walked past me as if I were invisible. It was then that I realized they were not human. Their skin was grayish, deeply wrinkled, and their eyes were a solid black. Despite their appearance, they didn't seem menacing or evil. They continued walking until they disappeared into the thick brush. I was left in shock, questioning the reality of what I had just witnessed. To this day, I am still trying to understand that encounter. I was hiking in a national park during late spring, the weather ideal for the activity. My friend John and I, both experienced hikers familiar with the area, decided to embark on a day hike in one of our favorite parks. We started our journey early in the morning, following a trail that led into a densely wooded section of the park. The path meandered through thick forests, occasionally opening up to clearings with views of the surrounding countryside. As we progressed, the absence of other people struck us as unusual, especially on such a splendid day for hiking. About an hour into our hike, we stumbled upon large three-toed animal tracks on the trail, resembling those of a bird or dinosaur. While examining them closely, a loud crashing noise from behind, accompanied by heavy breathing, startled us. I spun around just in time to see a massive creature, possibly covered in feathers or fur, charging through the trees towards me. It happened so swiftly that I couldn't get a clear view. The creature sped past me, and John, quick to react, managed to take several photos before it vanished back into the woods. We stood there for a few minutes dumbfounded, trying to comprehend what had just occurred. John speculated it might have been someone in a costume playing tricks on hikers, but I disagreed, considering the creature's incredible speed. Based on my encounter, I am convinced of the creature's existence. I have not returned to the park since and have no intention of doing so. Can you blame me? I'd rather not take the risk. My family and I went camping at a national park in the fall of 2007. We had reserved a site on one of the loops that are further away from all the other campers because we like our privacy. The first day there was uneventful, but when night fell, things started to get weird. There were only 2 other campsites occupied near us. They were about 3 or 4 sites down from ours. We were sitting around the fire talking when my daughter noticed something moving out in front of us by some trees with a flashlight beam. It was a person walking towards our campsite through some tall grass, which would have made it hard for anyone to walk through without tripping or making noise, since it is pretty loud when you walk on it. The figure just kept coming closer and closer until we could make out that he was wearing what looked like an old-fashioned duster coat with boots and had long hair pulled back into a ponytail under his hat. He never once acknowledged us as he passed right by our campsite heading toward another loop where no one else was camping. I didn't think much of it at first, but then later that night, while everyone else was asleep, I saw someone standing outside my tent looking in. All I could see, though, were their legs, because they must have been bending over to look inside since my tent isn't very tall. Eventually, whoever it was left, and nothing happened after that, until morning came. At sunrise, we got up early so we could pack up before breakfast. We always do this so we can leave right after eating. When I walked over to put out the fire, I noticed footprints leading from behind my car all the way up next to my tent. The prints themselves weren't too strange, except for how deep they went into the ground, considering how lightweight whoever made them must have been, judging by how little dirt actually came up around them. In addition to those footprints, there were more that went off into the woods. They looked like they had been made by someone running because they were spaced far apart from each other and also seemed to be going in a straight line for quite some distance before turning abruptly right or left every now and then. The weirdest thing about all of this, though, is how we never heard anything during the night. It's almost as if whoever was out there knew exactly where to step so they wouldn't make any noise. When I told my husband what I found, he thought it might have been a prankster who got bored and decided to mess with us campers, since no one else was around at that time of year besides those 2 sites down from ours. I didn't really buy his theory, though, because why would anyone go through all that trouble just to scare us? Plus, neither of our neighbors seemed like the type who would do something like this, considering how quiet and respectful they both were, not to mention how old one couple appeared, probably in their late 60s. After we packed up everything, we drove over near where their site was, hoping maybe we could ask them if they saw anything strange last night too. When we arrived, though, their tent was gone. All that remained were tire tracks leading away, which meant either they had left early without saying goodbye, or something happened during the night, causing them to leave unexpectedly. At first, I thought maybe whoever had been watching us scared them off, but after thinking about it some more, I realized how unlikely that scenario actually is, given what little evidence exists regarding these events. So now here comes the part where things get even stranger than before. As soon as my family left the national park, weird stuff started happening back home. I live on an acreage outside of town, surrounded by trees. So normally you don't see much activity out here, except for birds or deer passing through occasionally. One evening shortly after returning from our camping trip, however, while sitting on the porch enjoying the sunset together, we heard what sounded like footsteps coming up behind us. We both turned around quickly, expecting to see someone walking towards us, but instead, there was nothing except darkness and silence. It happened again a few nights later, only this time during the early morning hours when most people are still asleep. My husband had gone into town to run errands, leaving me home alone, which I don't mind because I feel safe out here, knowing no one can get near without making noise first. Anyway, while getting ready for work, I noticed movement outside the bathroom window, so I looked out to see what it was. At first, I couldn't make anything out due to the lack of light, but then I saw a figure standing just beyond the tree line, staring directly at me through the glass. The way he positioned himself made it impossible to determine whether or not he was wearing a hat or had long hair tied back, like the person who walked past our campsite that night in National Park. He didn't move until he suddenly started pounding on the side of the house with such force that it shook the whole building, causing pictures to fall off the walls, even though they were hung securely with nails rather than hooks. My heart raced with fear as I ran down the hallway to grab my phone and call the police, fearing the intruder might try to break the windows next if he couldn't gain entry any other way. After dialing 911, though, I realized I hadn't heard any more noises since the last loud bang against the wall, nor did it sound like anyone was moving about outside anymore either. Still, I decided to go ahead and report the incident just in case. They needed to be aware of a possible danger lurking in the area, especially considering how secluded my property is compared to others nearby. A few minutes after hanging up the phone, I went back to the living room to turn on the porch lights, hoping to deter whoever might still be hiding in the shadows from view while waiting for law enforcement to arrive. As soon as I stepped onto the porch, however, I spotted him crouched low to the ground, just a few feet away, under the window where I had originally seen him earlier. He appeared much closer now, thanks to the increased illumination provided by those newly activated lamps attached to the eaves along the front of my house. It took everything within me to remain calm and collected, despite being scared out of my wits at that moment, thinking about how vulnerable the situation truly felt. Suddenly, he lunged toward the sliding glass door leading inside the home, prompting me to scream before darting back into the darkness, beyond the reach of the illumination cast by the outdoor fixtures. At this point, I was completely freaked out, realizing I was dealing with someone not normal, given the fact that most people would have taken off already, rather than continue to terrorize me like he was clearly doing now. Fortunately, the police arrived shortly thereafter and quickly searched the area, but found no sign of the intruder nearby, suggesting he must have fled the scene during their brief absence en route here. I gave them a detailed description of everything I had experienced so far, along with an account of the events that had unfolded since returning from the national park. They took notes and asked several questions before promising to increase patrols around my property for the rest of the week, just in case anything else happened in the meantime. Well, that was over a year ago, and I haven't had any further issues since then. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted from us either, and I guess I probably never will, unless he somehow resurfaces someday, somewhere unexpected, I suppose. Anyway, I thought I'd share my story here, in hopes that others might shed some light on the matter, based on personal experiences of a similar nature, involving encounters with strangers behaving oddly at odd hours within rural settings. I was on holiday in America, visiting friends in New Jersey. We opted to go camping at High Point State Park, located near the New York State border. The park boasts many trails, and we chose one that would lead us to the state's highest land point, at an elevation of 1,803 feet. Although the trail was quite steep, it was manageable due to the steps carved into the rock face. We had been hiking for about an hour when we arrived at a plateau dotted with large boulders. It was there that I caught a glimpse of something unusual from the corner of my eye. As I looked in that direction, I saw what appeared to be a tall, thin man in all black dart behind one of the boulders. His long hair, or perhaps a hooded top, gave a creepy impression. I called out to my friend, who had also seen him run behind another boulder further away. We approached the area where he had vanished, but found no sign of anyone. My friend speculated that maybe someone had wandered off the trail and was lost, suggesting we check to see if they needed assistance. Commencing our search, we called out hello every few minutes. After about 10 minutes, we heard our names being called back, surprisingly by what seemed like two different voices coming from opposite directions. It wasn't until that evening, as we recounted the day's events, that the oddness of the situation dawned on us. Why would someone be dressed in black, running through the woods? Why did they not respond to our calls? How did they manage to disappear without a trace? And peculiarly, why did their voices sound exactly like ours? We remain baffled by the occurrence. Thank you for reading my account. I hope you find it interesting, and perhaps someone else has experienced something similar in this area. This happened on October 10th, 2017, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was at an elevation of about 9,000 feet above sea level and saw what appeared to be a silver disc flying around some cliffs. I had just been out walking with my camera, trying to capture some pictures of mule deer, when I stumbled upon a small group of elk cows feeding along the hillside below me. I had spotted a bull nearby, but he didn't come into view until later, so at that time, it was only these 3 cows that I could photograph. There were several birds around as well, mostly crows and magpies, although there may have been other species present. As I was taking photos of the elk, one cow started acting very strangely. She turned her head towards something off to her left and stood motionless for several seconds. Then she suddenly bolted up the hill as fast as she could, while still maintaining her footing. The other 2 cows followed right behind her. At first, I thought they might have heard or smelled something that scared them, but then I noticed that all the birds had taken off as well, which was odd since they hadn't made any noise before that. It wasn't until after reviewing my photographs, later on my computer, that I noticed this shiny object flying over the cliff in one of the pictures. I can't say for sure if it's a UFO, but it certainly looks like one. It doesn't resemble anything you would normally see in nature anyway. If you want more information, please let me know.